Leadership. All my life, I've been fascinated by what makes a good leader. Are good leaders born or made? Can leadership be taught? How do leaders lead if people don't trust to even listen? I grew up in Arkansas. Now I live and work in the innovation heartland of Northern California. During these last years of constant crisis, I've thought more deeply about what leadership is and what it takes to lead people, especially when trust is in limited supply. That's why I decided to create this podcast and reach out to changemakers from different disciplines to hear what they have to say. As the host of this show, the most important things I can do are two things I learned in medical school: to ask good questions and then listen. Hello, I'm Lloyd Minor, Dean of the Stanford School of Medicine, and welcome back to the Minor Consult. It's my privilege to welcome this week's guest, Emmy and Golden Globe nominated producer Jennifer Todd. Her credits include more than 24 major comedies, thrillers, and dramas, ranging from the Austin Powers franchise to the movie Jason Bourne to reimaginings of Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. A governor for the producers branch of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, Jennifer has twice served as the producer of the televised Academy Awards ceremony. And she's currently producing films under her banner, Jennifer Todd Pictures. Over the course of more than 2 decades, Jennifer has been instrumental in bringing us truly memorable TV series, movies, and specials, and she has led large, complex productions at the highest levels of entertainment. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for joining me today, and welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So, Jennifer, we've had guests on this podcast from politics, journalism, innovators, and authors, but you're our first from the world of film and television. What led you to pursue a career as a producer?
Well, I'm honored to be in their company, and like I said, I hope I can be enlightened today. I grew up in LA, and my parents were not in the film business, but I happened to go to a school that a lot of parents were, and so I had the unusual insight to know that it was possible as a career. I think at that time, a lot of people didn't know that you actually could do that for a living. It kind of combined with my parents' divorce, and while they were going through what they were going through, my sister and I spent a lot of time at the movie theater out in the Valley. We grew up in the San Fernando Valley in LA, and we really loved movies. My middle sister, I have 2 older sisters, and so it was sort of the combination of those things that led us both actually to want to work in the business. It was sort of a passion for it, and then, like I said, not seeing my parents, but seeing friends' parents who were film producers or television producers, and thinking, oh, I could actually do that. That's a real job.
Exactly. And you must get a lot of ideas presented to you for television series, for movies, for other types of content. How do you choose which ones and which stories you bring to life? What do you look for?
It's a great question, and it's changed as I've gotten older. I think when I was younger and in the business and, passionate, I would take on things that I thought would be commercial or other people would like. And then I realized as a producer, you really have to see it yourself. So your taste has to be your taste, and there's a lot of movies that got made that I that I enjoy, but I wouldn't have known how to make. So I think first and foremost, I pick things that really speak to me that I want to see. And they can be comedies and dramas. As you said, I've been lucky enough to make a lot of different kind of content, but first and foremost, it has to be something that I want to see, and then I feel like I know how to tell. And then beyond that, then obviously it depends on what kind of material and how difficult it is. And the business has changed so much and continues to change that you're always kind of figuring out where and if you can make something.
And what type of special challenges have come about during COVID-19 for you as a producer, as you bring together people to make things happen? What challenges have you encountered because of the pandemic?
Well, there's quite a few challenges. The first is the state of the theatrical film. right? Unfortunately, movie theaters were, as people's home televisions have grown, people have been going to the movie theaters less and less, which is very sad for us who grew up going, having the experience. But so, theatrical movies were already in a state of decreasing, and things like the Marvel movies and illumination movies like Despicable Me, kids movies, horror, those ones were still playing, but for the most part, we were already it was already shrinking, and because of, like I said, because of technology in people's homes, theaters, and then in addition, streaming, people were staying home more. Then COVID hit and just, and just accelerated it much faster than it was even going. So now there's a lot of theatrical movies that I would have made to go into a theater 10, 15 years ago that now would only be considered streaming movies. Let me give you an example, like a romantic comedy. I used to get to make things like Must Love Dogs and Prime, and they came out in the theaters. Now those films, if I was making them, would only live on Amazon, Netflix, and Netflix does very well. They have a lot of YA romance, they have all these kind of subgenres, but that's all really changed. So it's been interesting trying to keep on your feet. And it's been also interesting trying to figure out what you can make that would still go in a theater, Then on top of it, the COVID issues, like every business, added just a lot of cost to filmmaking. And I got to make one film last May. It was actually just a 4-day shoot. It's called Come From Away. We went into Broadway theater. It's a Broadway show. It's really beautiful, about the town of Gander, Canada, who took in all these people off the planes on 9/11 for 5 days. And it's this great musical. I didn't have anything to do with the Broadway show, but I got to make the movie of it. And we went there for 4 days. I was vaccinated. I had to be quarantined for 48 hours. All the food had to be catered. Anyways, it was $1 million extra for a 4-day shoot. That's what it cost. We had to buy at a hotel. We had, we were walked to and from the theater. We ate out of boxes. You know what I mean? Like, just so unfortunately for me and for everybody else, it's just added a huge cost and a risk level to making things. So I'm not sure that we're still getting made the level of things we would have made. It's unfortunately the financiers have to really want to make something because it's costing them more.
Right. Are there particular stories that would only work in cinema and others that would only work on streaming? And how do you weigh that when you're choosing a project to take on and bring something to life?
It's a great question. And I think, you'll have, there's no finite to it, but like the things that people still, like you look at Spider-Man, obviously did incredibly well in the theater. So people still like the event. They still like Marvel and spectacle and you can't get that the same as your house, right? So there's that. Then there's, I think there's, what I consider a date night movie. So it's weird on a first date to be like, hey, come over on my couch and watch Netflix and chill. I think that comes later in a relationship. So those could be horror films. People like horror, if you're a horror fan, people like the collective experience, the scares, all that kind of stuff. And that kind of falls into that. And perhaps some comedies will survive. And then for the kind of date night, as I call it, or a need to get out of your house. And then the last sort of, for me, I look at the last sort of sub is, family films. So like you have a 5-year-old, the Disney Channel is just not going to cut it. Like you want to get them out, you want to see, Encanto, you want to, which, you can't, or, Despicable Me, and take them to lunch and that. So I think those are kind of the big banners of things that, still play theatrically. I think the rest is a real question mark. Before COVID, I made a film with, I think a really beautiful film with Ben Affleck called The Way Back. That's about, he's a basketball coach, but it's also about addiction. And when we were filming it, I remember thinking, even then, and we filmed it in the end of 2018, I thought, wow, this is probably the last adult-driven drama I'm going to get to make for the theater, because it was still a theatrical film. We came out March of 2020. We played for 2 weeks in the cinema. Everything shut down, and it went on streaming. It went on everything, and then you could buy it. And in truth, it was really an example of like that kind of film. I don't think I would ever get made for a theatrical reason again. I think it would fall under the adult-driven dramas. I think have definitely gone to the streamers.
Do you think live or in-person cinema is going to return when we get into a new normal?
I hope so. I hope that there's a demand. I know that that I would like to go. I think that I hope that when you feel safe, and it's hard because we had so many stop starts with COVID, that you'll have a desire to want to be out in the world, that we've all Netflix and chilled a lot in that. And like, you know what I mean? And now you're like, let's go out to dinner and let's see a movie and let's see friends and let's be among people, because it's such a difference. You'll know too, when you see a movie in a theater versus watching it on TV, we're just watching it on an airplane, right? Like there's all these different ways we I hate to call it content, but we absorb content, and there's just nothing's the same as a theater. You not looking at your phone, you're watching a big screen, the sound and everything like that, and the collective experience of hearing or feeling the energy of people around you. It's just not the same. You know what I mean? It's just not unique. And I do hope people will go back. And I do think at least some people will go back,
Right. Well, what's the most gratifying part of your job? You've produced films and television series in multiple different genres. What brings you the most joy and fulfillment in projects that you're looking at?
For me, I think it's when I actually get something made. I work in development for so long on things. I work on the scripts, and television shows have outlines and you're getting notes and all of that. And and when you finally get to put it together, I think that like first day of filming, it's interesting. You don't have that, by the time the movie premieres, you've moved on. So I think for me, it's that first day of filming when I walk around and I think, wow, I helped make this happen. I helped employ all these people are here because I didn't give up on this script or this project. Like for me, that's the most satisfying thing, is actually getting to see it come to life. And I think when I got to do the Oscars, that was incredibly special because that was the only thing I've ever done that's live. It's funny, we work on things for so long as producers, years on scripts, and then they film. Like I said, the way back, we shot at the end of 2018. It came out the beginning of 2020. That was just because they were waiting for the date, So, your friends were always like, what is that thing? What do you do? Like, how long does it take? Why is it done faster? Because you finish shooting and you edit and sound and mix and marketing materials, and it just everything takes so long. So the fun of the Oscars was just, I had never done anything live like that, where it's like 3, 2, 1, and you're on, and like no matter what, it has to be ready in that moment. Those two shows were incredibly exciting for me in a different way.
Well, following up on the Oscars, of course, in 2017, right at the end, the Best Motion Picture Award, and of course, La La Land was called to the stage, and actually Moonlight won. What were you thinking as that was going on, and what changes did that lead to in 2018 and beyond?
Well, it's so crazy because as the producer, you're responsible for so much of the show, but I'm actually I wasn't responsible for anything to do with the secrecy of the nominee. We don't know who won or anything like that. But I was backstage, but not, the stage backstage is quite large. And so the producers have kind of a bank towards the side of monitors in which we can watch things. And we have hotlines. We have microphones, kind of like the one I have headsets on. And, the show was done because that's Best Picture was the last award of the night. It had just been over midnight in New York, which is when you want to end your show. So we kind of got to our last commercial break. ABC kind of pressures you to hit your last commercial break before midnight, which we did barely So I was just feeling, victorious and great. Someone put a glass of champagne in front of me. It's such a long day. Anyways, you've been up since 5 a.m. It's 9 o'clock. You feel like you've lived for life. And then I heard screaming through the headsets, and it was like slow motion for me what happened. But I think obviously everybody kind of knows the story. There's accountants that are responsible for this. And there was one of the accountants, there's accountants on both sides of the stage, and he, handed the wrong envelope. And I think Warren and Faye were, confused in the moment of why they had a card that said Emma Stone La La Land on it. So they read La La Land, as the winner. Like it was just a perfect storm of things going wrong. But now they have a third accountant in the booth with the director who knows the winners and can easily tell the director in the booth if there's a problem. So hopefully that will never happen again. But it was a crazy time. It took like days to digest what happened.
Well, the only thing I guess we can ultimately predict in life is that there's going to be an element of unpredictability in everything.
Well, that's the fun of live television. And in truth, I mean, it's painful because obviously I really loved our show that year and I thought it was really beautifully done. I thought Jimmy Kimmel did a great job. But it's so funny because out in the world, people are like, oh, you did the Oscars, which were your shows? And I go, the envelope and the one after it. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, for better, for worse, I'm married in time to this very crazy night. But, that's what's exciting. And I think when we talk about, movies and TV and content now, like that's what's great about live. Like you can't, it was like the Streaker years ago with David Niven, or what I mean? Like there's just that's why people in truth want to watch live TV, is to see what happens.
Sure. We both are in professions where we have the privilege of working with amazing people, and so much of what we do as leaders is really dependent upon the people around us. And one of your important responsibilities as a producer is, of course, to pick those people at various different levels. What do you look for, and how has it changed over the years as you've become more and more experienced as a producer, and perhaps had the benefit of knowing that some of the decisions didn't work, but others worked phenomenally, and so that impacts how you make decisions in the future about the people you choose for various roles?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I always say that I don't really have any talent myself, but my super skill is picking talented people. Like I said, it's okay that I don't do it, but I can recognize it in other people. And it's interesting. I mean, I feel really fortunate that I get to do what I do for a living, and that I get to work with the kind of people I do. And it's kind of across the board, whether it's writers or directors, or then it's the crew people, it's the crew members, it's the actors. And I can't tell you, like, it's not one specific thing. It really, I think, goes across all walks of life, of people who care and are incredibly passionate. And like, no matter what your job is, if you do it with a lot of love and skill, you're bound to be good at it. I think that the business is really hard. Our business is very difficult. So if you're not crazy in love with it, you shouldn't do it, because it's just too hard. There are easier things in life than trying to do this. So I think you have to be a little nutty to start with, but it has to be that thing that you wake up and it drives you more than anything else, and I think those are the people who really get great at what they do and then thrive. And I think if you're half in, half out, you'll never, whether you're an actor or a makeup artist or whatever, it's just never going to work. You just kind of have to want to kind of live it and breathe it. I think that's what makes the difference, especially in a creative business. And then I think as a manager, it's about kind of mixing people up and not trying to hire the same type of person too many times over, because you can kind of, when you're building a team, I think it's very important that you can recognize all the different skill sets. Even I used to work, produce with my sister, and sometimes we occasionally do. And it's funny because even though we're sisters and our taste is really aligned, our skill set's really different. And we would divide and conquer a bit on movies, and people would do that. So we would actually try not to do the same aspect of the job, because it felt there was enough to do that we would kind of, split it up. But it was interesting, even as a family, it was like, oh, you do that, I do that kind of thing. So I think that that's really important, is to kind of avoid the redundancy.
Sure. COVID, of course, has been stressful on everyone, and certainly it's been stressful in the entertainment industry, where for so long it was hard, as you were describing, just to get things done because of all the restrictions and understandable health concerns. You mentioned the importance of a real sense of passion, and you look for that in the people that you bring on to the various roles in your films and other productions. Has that passion been affected by all the uncertainty that we've lived through and that we continue to experience, or is it still burning strongly in the people that you surround yourself with?
I think their passion is still there. I think the circumstances have made it really hard. It's like, it's interesting. We're a creative business, and even when you're there, you're forced to, even when you're trying to create, you're forced to wear masks. Of course, this is just, but like harder to see people's, behaviors, hard to hear their energy. It's very hard. I think even from, when you're making something, it's just got that much harder for the actors. My husband's an actor, and last year he was doing a film, and he was saying it was so strange as an actor to be the one on set when everyone else around you is in face shields. and then you have to, he felt very vulnerable in the moment because you're like, oh my God, am I going to get, this was before the vaccine. So, before, am I going to get COVID? And then also you're just like communicating with people and you're trying to read their energy and everyone's, it's just, it's not, it seems strange. And then obviously the, for actors and scenes, they have to actually touch people and be around them and pretend like life is normal. It's even more acting than usual. And I think from my side, like what I do since when I'm not filming, I'm doing so much of my work on Zoom, and I'm curious, I'm sure, I mean, the way this has affected everybody, but again, we're cracking story or we're doing and like all the personal aspects of it are kind of out the window. Like you drop into a Zoom, you're like, okay, great, pitch your story, and it sounds dumb, but like I miss the walking in with the writer and saying, how are you feeling? Da, da, da. Okay, yeah, this is what we're pitching to, and da, 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 this is, and then walking out and you kind of have your, your download and your kind of personal aspect to everything. And now it's just like 8 a.m., 9, 10, Zoom. I really, really miss the personal interactions. I do think it has an effect on the creativity. I really do. I don't think it's affected anybody's wants for it. I just think it's made it harder for us to kind of do what we do well,
Understand. I know that men have traditionally been overrepresented in film and television production. And you mentioned your sister before, and you've done some projects with your sister. But what's been your experience as a woman leader in this field? And have you seen things change over time? And what needs to change in the future?
It's changed tremendously in my life, in the time that I've been in the business. And when I started out as an assistant working for male producers, I wasn't even sure that I would ever get to be one because there were so few. Then it was really a very different dynamic. I always joke that I think that women actually make great producers because producers are kind of project managers and we juggle a lot at once. And I just think women are geared for that. I think we're biologically, we're supposed to be like, we've got a baby on our hip and we're making dinner and we're doing all those things. And I think it kind of applies to movies. I think I have to manage a great amount of people and kind of kept my ego aside. And I think women might be better at it than men, certain jobs. But I think that it's definitely changed tremendously. Producing is a field where there's many, I think the numbers have gotten quite good for women. I know in the academy, we look all the time at like membership. I think there's certain fields that are still making up. I think directing is obviously one that people are really focused on and women are starting to become much more represented, given many more opportunities. Cinematography is one that's interesting and has to do with old fashioned, like carrying camera equipment, but we're seeing more women in that, but it's definitely taken a big leap forward. Not only that, but also at the studios, the people who say yes to your movies, right? When you're trying to finance a movie, whether it's a studio or finance, those were almost entirely men when I started. There was one woman at each studio, and now it's much more representative.
That's great. Well, congratulations on the role you've played in helping bring about that change. Well, you must mentor young people who are interested in producing or directing. What advice do you give them, and what pitfalls do you advise them to look out for as they're planning their careers?
Well, it's so hard. Trying to be a full-time producer is a really difficult job because you're not, you're kind of, most of producers are freelance and you're working project to project. And a lot of questions I get are young people who come to me and they're like, I've produced my first movie while I still was doing this other job. Should I quit and now be a producer? And I'm like, I can't tell you because I can't tell you what you're going to get done. I don't want you to starve. I think it's really, I try to tell them kind of where we started, which is like really take on the things you feel passionately about and that you can see through. Don't try to pick something just because you think other people are going to like it, because I think that's really hard to see through. I think that like I said, there are many very successful horror movies that wouldn't know how to make. And, I'm like, okay, great for them that they can do that. That wouldn't be my skill set. I wouldn't bring a lot to that, so I don't think that would be for me. But yeah, I think it's like real determination. And also I think really trying to keep aware. It's like the business is like all these businesses, very who moved my cheese every day. You're like, who's making what, and like I said, it's changing very much. All these streamers, some of them are very new, and it's so it's like trying to figure out what you want to make and how it overlaps in the system. It's like, where does that go? I was looking, I was just talking to a writer who I love, we've been working on a musical idea, and he said, is anyone going to make it? And I was like, oh, I think we could make it as a streamer. I don't think we could make it as a theatrical film. But I do think there's appetite, and I think it's important for the young people to really kind of, read the trades and kind of talk to their friends. And it's a lot about kind of tracking where the market's going, if that makes sense.
Sure, sure. And on that topic of where the market is going, of course, we're all trying to discern the longer term ramifications and effects of the pandemic. And we're seeing a lot has been written about the Great Resignation, still uncertainties about long-term COVID and its health effects. How does that affect what you may be thinking about in terms of future projects or storylines that will be meaningful to audiences in the future, given that it seems like one of the long-term effects of the pandemic may be a shift in what people seek in their entertainment? And how have you started to dissect that? And is that affecting your decision-making on projects?
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on. There's two things, which is like, how painful is this to make if there's a COVID, right? Like there's certain things that feel more contained and more, or do I have to go to, Romania to make something in the middle of a pandemic? I mean, people did. I mean, people kept making things, like I said, just under really much harder conditions. I hope that there's like a post-COVID renaissance. You know what I mean? I hope we can have, like, in art in general, not just film, but in all kinds of art, I hope that we can come out of this kind of darkness and really be inspired to create at a higher level than we've ever been able to do before. That's my wish for the business, that we can have kind of the 70s, that were a great time in cinema. Like we can, kind of have a revolution and do that. But I also think personally, I realized that during COVID and all the uncertainty that I was really drawn towards, and people watched it all, but I think sometimes you're like, with age too, you like, you want to make some levity, you want to make some comedy, you want to make, I watched I Don't Look Up over the break, which I loved. And I realized I just needed a release, and I thought, oh God, I realized, how important kind of comedies and lighter material it can be too. Like we're always going to make it all, but I think me personally, I'm excited. I have a TV show that's going to start in June. That's a musical half-hour romantic comedy. And I thought, this will be a fun world for me to live in and then to bring to the world for a little bit,
Sure. Well, topics related to diversity and inclusion are on all of our minds in society today. And I think they've been heightened. Their importance has been heightened because of COVID, because we've seen the disparate effects of COVID on communities of color and so many other ways, drawing out the injustices and inequities in society. How do you think about those topics in the programming that you're looking at, or in the storylines that you're developing? And how do you see the receptivity of society to those topics and to their incorporation into what we traditionally called entertainment? How is that perhaps going to change in the future?
I think it'll continue to be. I think Hollywood is pretty good about being early adapters to things, and obviously, I think that we did grow. There was a lot of work to be done, but I think it's getting done there. I think we are making a lot more movies and television that feel more inclusive. I think we're much more aware of that. I think in the times that I was filmmaking, and it's not just the filmmakers, the studios too. Everyone's sort of challenging us to look at our casting, look at our crews, and not look at our subject matter. And it's interesting because sometimes you want to make content that's about the challenges, and sometimes you want to just make things that have representation that aren't deliberately about a racial, right? You just want to see people in romantic comedies that are of different backgrounds. That's not always about telling the stories are important, but also just seeing them represented in all kinds of entertainment is very important. I'm really proud of the Academy that we adapted these guidelines to, where, but when you're going to make a film, we have a certain kind of sort of standards of making sure you've interviewed enough people from diversity backgrounds, and that you have hired enough people, whether it's behind or in front of the camera, so that the movies always feel more inclusive. So it's not just the in front, but like in back in the making of the film as well. which I think will be great moving forward. And I think then hopefully we can get the level of equality to be much stronger.
Technology has changed all of our lives. I know it's affected your life and your business in film and other broadcast media. Can you describe over the course of your career how you've implemented technology in your productions, how that's affected your staffing, and are we going to move to actually having a much smaller workforce in the film industry because more and more will be done by technology? Or how does all that sort out for you as you look at the work you're doing today and perhaps projecting forward in the next decade?
Yeah, there's so many levels to it, and how much has changed in my lifetime working in film. And, when I started working in movies, everything was shot on film. It was pre-digital, and everything digital changed a great deal, especially with the camera, with the sound work, with the visual effects. But it still takes a village to make a movie. And I think that what I love about where the world has gone is the freedom in which which anyone can make a film, because you can make a film on your iPhone now and it'll look pretty good, and that's an amazing freedom, so that you don't have to be in USC film school. If you're a kid at, somewhere else in the world and you're dying to make a film, you can make something of that. That wasn't available when I was a kid, like you couldn't do that. You needed a camera, and it was expensive and it was heavy. So I love what technology has done with that. And obviously, like I said, movies go to festivals all the time that are shot on phones now. It's crazy. So I think that that's amazing, an amazing equalizer for the business. I personally, because I'm of a certain age, sometimes I still prefer sometimes effects to be a little bit more practical and less virtual. Sometimes movies start to look like video games to me, but I think younger people, it doesn't matter because they grew up playing these video games that that look like that. So for me, it's like I think about like the alien coming out of the stomach in Alien, and how visceral it felt, because it was done with cornstarch and a fake alien. It wasn't done with a computer effect. And for me, it has a different kind of emotional response when I watch a movie, when I know something feels a little bit realer. So I think that's always a question mark from me. Like I said, I'm of a certain generation of that. And so sometimes I think that I can watch some of those movies and the sheen of too many vis effects and all that kind of make me a little bit more distant from the film. But obviously there's a demand for a lot of that, and the visual effects are getting kind of better and better, and maybe they'll be able to kind of to find the middle ground. I think we're also dealing with this thing, like I said, not in the theater, but when you're watching at home, and on the Oscars, they would talk about it a lot too, of like second screen. So we generationally now have people who watch their phone and the television at the same time. It's just like, it's a, I don't know if it's Gen Z or whatever you want to call it, but like they're very used to the multiple screens at once thing, which is just kind of terrible, but it is, it's the way they're, digesting content, for lack of a better term, and that's just something you have to kind of bear in mind when you're making things, I guess.
Sure. On a global basis, what do you think Hollywood's position globally in film and entertainment will be a decade from now? Are there particular areas in other parts of the world that you're watching carefully, or that perhaps that you're involved in as a producer, outside of Hollywood, outside the United States? But what does the global landscape in terms of film and media production look like in the next decade? Is it going to grow to be a higher proportion of overall content, or not?
It's hard for me to predict where we'll be in 10 years. We've, the U.S., we've always been very at the forefront of filmmaking and storytelling, and I think we'll continue. It's just interesting but that yet I always like, there's strong storytellers everywhere, and a lot of times at this time of year, my favorite films are some of the international films, and the way they're people to make content, but their businesses tend to be quite smaller than ours as sort of their, I just watched the Worst Person in the World, which is a Norwegian film, which is beautiful, but they're not making the kind of amount of films and things that we are. But I think the biggest thing is really China and the theatrical business there, and the way the model is set up of like, there's a lot of money to be made there for the American film market, and they only take a certain amount of films. And so there's it's sort of a political scramble of what films get to show there. And I can't imagine that diminishing in the years to come, given China's population and desire to see things, obviously depending on what happens with COVID. But, I think that's really the biggest international piece of business and obviously, we sell our movies and we show them globally. And I saw a really great clip with somebody who was, on the other day, that was showing Voldemort in all his different languages, dubs, him yelling, and like, for when it goes internationally, and, all these actors have to, dub the film in their own languages and everything like that. It was very funny to see, but it's still, made by the US and then sent out in the world.
In thinking about those global markets, and in particular China, what type of stories and content are appealing in that market?
Well, it is those sort of big blockbuster. I mean, I think that, the Spider-Mans and the Marvels, I think, are really the biggest draw there for sure. I think it's sort of our big frame entertainment, which is why those movies will be the most consistent ones to keep getting made, right? Though I think the Marvel films have just been more and more successful, and since they drive so much internationally as well. Sure.
Maybe turning to a final topic here on leadership, more broadly speaking. And I'm curious, and we've touched on this a bit in our conversation, but how have your thoughts and your approach to leadership changed because of the past 2 years of COVID? And how will that shape you as a leader moving forward in your producing career?
I don't know if I quite know yet. Part of me, yearns for the normalcy of it, but I think that, like everyone, we're also looking at the way we did business, and I know it will change and as I said, I complain about Zooms, but before COVID, we kind of ran around and did a lot more in person. We jumped on planes for scouts and meetings at like a moment's notice, and I can't imagine that won't change. And I think from a leadership position, it's really about, I do think really looking at what has to happen, and it happens in the most efficient way possible, will definitely change, because we were just, like, I'm sure so many businesses and so many leaders you talked to another bit, we were kind of used to the way things were. And once it was taken down for COVID, you know what I mean? When you're building it back up again, maybe that will be the upside of COVID, is we'll be able to kind of make our plan stronger, not send someone somewhere for no reason, you know what I mean? Not maybe be like, instead of driving across town, let's save everybody some energy, jump on a Zoom, all of that kind of stuff. I think that will be integrated. But, when you're actually making something, it still has to be made the old fashioned way with people live in person. Although in truth, you can edit by Zoom. A lot of times people are doing their post-production differently. So almost every aspect is touched by it, except for the actual filming. That you kind of have to be there with, actors with makeup on and, a camera running and, someone keeping the cars from driving by the street, that's it. Just that part has to kind of stay, I think, relatively the same.
That makes a lot of sense. I know we're certainly doing a lot more virtually than we thought we ever would. Of course, there are telehealth appointments that were very, very rare prior to COVID-19 that now account for maybe 30-40% of outpatient visits. And when we're doing searches, faculty searches, leadership searches, now the initial interviews, the initial discussions are all done virtually. And in fact, we even, during the height of the pandemic, went through an entire hiring process for a senior leader without the person ever coming to our campus, except that they had been to our campus on previous occasions prior to this search. So would have never thought that could occur, but it is. And I think, like you were, for us, things like symposia and seminars can work pretty well in the virtual world. And by the way, if the speaker is in Berlin, it's a lot less wear and tear to be doing it in the Zoom world than it is making a trip back and forth for a seminar and visits with faculty. So I think there'll be some enduring, long-term, and liberating effects, as you were describing for your industry. But there'll be things that we all explore and learn in real time moving forward, I think.
Yeah, you would have flown these people in much without thinking, kind of, or they would have come in, and now you can think about it. But I think, when we do get to be in person, it's still great. So it's like you want to have some kind of combination of what it was and what it can be without it. Like I said, it's sometimes just there's nothing that can replace the kind of, just emotional. You just read people differently when you're in person with them. So it's a combination.
Well, lastly, if I might ask, what projects do you have in the pipeline?
Well, I'm really excited. I have a show that's on Showtime now called City on a Hill with Kevin Bacon. We're shooting its third season. It'll be on later this year. It's a Boston crime drama that's set in the 90s. So if anyone's seen that. And then I'm starting another television show in June for Hulu. It's 8 episodes. It's called Up Here. And it's a musical. It's funny enough. It starts in the late 90s. I guess we're all doing period stuff, but so that won't be on Hulu probably till 2023. But we start shooting in June, so I'm excited to get back to production. So
wonderful. Well, Jennifer, congratulations. Thank you for all that you do. All of us have enjoyed, learned from, been stimulated by your productions, and we look forward to many, many more in the future.
Oh, that's so kind. Thank you.
And thank you for listening to the Minor Consult with me, Stanford School of Medicine Dean Lloyd Minor. I hope you enjoyed today's insightful discussion with Emmy-nominated film and television producer Jennifer Todd. We'll be back next week with more groundbreaking and brilliant guests as we continue to look at leadership during a once-in-a-generation crisis. Please send your questions by email to theminorconsult@theminorconsult.com and check out our website, theminorconsult.com, for updates, episodes, and more. To get the latest episodes of The Minor Consult, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please rate the podcast 5 stars. Your feedback helps make this podcast happen. Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to our next episode. Until then, stay safe, stay well, and be kind.